Hey, Kristen Nolan.
Hey, how are you? Hello? Hi, I see that you're on the meeting. So, Nick just said that we will not go into. Mick, I just talked to Dave and he said to go ahead and forward the management letter. So I'm going to send that to everybody.
Okay, great. Sounds good.
Goes to Nick. Hurry it up. Austin.
Good evening.
Hello, Burrito.
Hello,
Hi,
Maria.
everyone.
How are you?
I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yes. Just got the letter, Kristen. Thank you.
Okay, great. Wrong with that.
Is this it? Where's everybody?
Kath is coming, although she's not feeling well,
I noticed that Marjorie wasn't able to make it.
which is odd for Marjorie. She loves this stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully Austin's coming.
Yeah.
And hopefully Jerron.
Okay.
Let me.
I'm here.
I'll do some texting around to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll do some calling too.
Actually, I think Jerron's name is Jaron. Do you know how to say it?
It's not.
I thought it was Jerron.
Oh.
hopefully he'll be here and he can correct us one way or the other. So this is Duran. And I double checked to make sure. I apologize for mangling his name's pronunciation many times. He's Duran. I'm going to rename. There we go. Okay, great. Hello, Duran.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Jerron.
Hi, Duran.
So 4 gives us a quorum. I'm not sure. I haven't heard back from Austin yet. Marjorie says she cannot make it. Valerie has a conflict. So, and Marjorie, yeah, Marjorie says, so I think we have a quorum here and we can, if you, it's up to you, Ms. Dolan, it's your show.
Yes, let's get started. Let's open the meeting here. All right, so we're opening the meeting at 7:07. I'll take the attendance. Kathleen Schumacher,
Shoemaker, please.
Shoemaker, sorry. Austin Caesar. Here. Duran Elston,
It's Alston. It's actually
Alston.
Mhm.
Boy, we're getting it always.
It's okay.
Marjorie Bonadies is absent. Valerie's absent. And Farida. Was with us. Still here?
And what is our agenda for this meeting, please?
Our agenda is to receive the audit.
Thank you.
All right, can we have a motion to receive the audit?
I so move.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Mr. Capoletti, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate your time. Can you go ahead and sort of give us the overview of the audit, and then we can have time for some questions and answers. Just to let everyone know that Mr. Capoletti will join us again on March 29th for the full council. Hello, Mr. Jackson. he'll join us again on March 29th for the full council. So tonight is sort of a preview. You can digest the audit report, have a couple of weeks to submit any questions. My plan would be to have everyone submit the questions to me, and I'll forward them on to Mr. Capoletti. And then you can ask them in the open meeting on the floor, but this way he'll be prepared. So hopefully we'll sort of minimize the, I don't know, I'll research that kind of answers. So we'll give them a little heads up, and that way we can have more of a dialogue than I'll get back to you later sort of stuff. All righty. All right, Mr. Capoletti, let's take it away. Thanks.
Okay. And do I have control of the screen?
We'll set you up for that right now, Mr. Capoletti.
Thank you.
Okay, so instead of doing that, I booted him out, but now I'm bringing him back. Just a moment. There he is. Sorry, Mr. Capoletti. Clicked in the wrong area. There you are. Should be set in a second.
I'm sorry. So everyone could see my screen now? Okay.
Got it.
Okay, great. All right. So what we'll do is we'll start on Exhibit C, and then we'll go through each of the funds categories individually as we go. And then if you have any questions, why don't we just go as we go along fund by fund. To begin off, like I said, is that you do have an audit, an unmodified opinion, but we did find two findings in internal controls, so we can go over those in a little bit after the financial statements. So here, what I've presented in front of you is the basically the governmental funds financial statements broken up into the general fund, which is one that you're probably more familiar with, the capital projects funds, and then the non-major governmental funds. And so what we'll probably do is go through the general fund first, and if we have any questions, we'll work with that. As I go along, I might refer to my management letter. I don't know if you guys had a chance to read it, but I'll just, hopefully that'll help you understand some other things that I either mentioned in the financial statements or in the findings. I just tried to give you a little bit more detail of that, okay? So what we're going for, or what we're seeing here now is in your general fund, you have a $4.2 million deficit, of which $5 million was an operating deficit, which leads your general fund balance down to a $2.2 million fund balance deficit. Okay, so that's against state statutes, obviously, if you're not aware of that. And you'll have to have a corrective action plan to bring that above zero. Okay. I'm just going to go over to your budget to actual report and show you some things that happened and maybe why, what caused this to happen. I'm going to go over to F if you're not watching it on my screen. Okay. And so, what we're seeing here in Exhibit F is that one of the things that pop right out, obviously you have a $5 million deficit. 7.7 million was because of revenues coming in short. And what I did in the management letter is try to summarize some of the larger items that caused this. And so I'm on page 3 of the management letter. And if you don't have it in front of you, I'll just go through some of the topics here. But the property taxes were short $3 million. 1.8 of that was probably a shortfall of collections, and 1.2 was referred to as a the incomplete property tax audits, some initiatives that were put into the budget that just never either began or weren't completed. Specifically was the personal property tax audits. Another shortfall was charges for services, 998,000 shortfall. Okay. One of the largest things was actually an audit adjustment, was that your private duty, police private duty was not collected. A substantial more portion of that wasn't collected from two to three large clients are, so basically if you don't collect the fees within 90 days, 60 days, then we don't really allow it to be recognized in the fiscal year. So you have a large list of delinquent receivables in that account. The license and permits I left blank as any reasonings, but that was down 1.5 million. Some of that could have been COVID related. There might have been other areas where you might want to look at why. Usually in towns and cities right now, we're seeing that property taxes were under collected, but that was made up by license and permits. So that didn't happen in the town of Hamden, and you might be a COVID related issue, but we didn't look into it as far as that. I don't think there was any one item. The miscellaneous was down 2.6 million. And that attributed 1.7 attributed to colleges under contributing 1.7 of the budget. And then you also did something on an annual basis. You always had some reimbursements from the bond fund. So there was none of that this year. So in the budget, you had 950,000 and we recorded 0 as a revenue item. Okay. And just to remind you, it's also in the budget, I'm sorry, in the management letter, but so capital projects, you normally had 3 ways of funding, providing finances to the general fund. And one would be to reimburse them for direct costs. One of the areas you did this was road construction. So you would in-house road construction, and that would be paid through bonds. The other way you would do it is indirect costs. So costs associated with either the capital projects or bond costs, you're allowed to take so much of the bond towards that. And on an annual basis, you would normally take a small portion for that. So you didn't do any of that this year. And third was commonly known as the sweep historically, which was basically taking the unused balance of the bonds on projects that have ended or canceled, and to put them into the general fund to pay back that original bond. So like I said, for those 3 things, none of those were recorded in the general fund. Okay. One of the things that I hear people ask is, that you did bond for 2.8 million in August. And if you did that in June or during the year, would that have helped the general fund? And so there's a yes and no to that. I mean, yes, it would have obviously helped your deficit, would have brought your 2.2 million deficit to a $600,000 in the black. But we've always commented, and I repeated it in the management letter too, just so you understand, just to keep it in the minds that, so the town, we've commented on this for in 2019, and I repeated that paragraph. And basically is that historically what the town has done is maintain themselves in the black by using either the premiums of the bond or the sweeps sometimes. And so what, and now to improve the financial position of the town, it really should be in the way of increased operations so that other financing resources, one-time items, the town is not dependent on. And so what we're really looking for is on F, when we take the total revenues less the expenses, it comes to $5 million. And then underneath that, we would add premiums and sweeps. Well, this year you didn't have any, but that negative 5 million is really what we're trying to look at to make that a positive number to add to your fund balance in the long term. Okay.
Okay.
And is there any other questions on the general fund?
So should we ask questions now about everything you just told us? Is that how you'd like?
Yeah, like what I was going to do is go fund by fund, because it could be overwhelming at the end.
Oh, okay. Yes, I have questions. I
Okay,
can
go ahead.
kick us off and then anyone else. Okay, so so a few follow-ups on what you just said. Let's see if I can get myself organized. So I think you started with the receivables.
Mhm.
Said that that shortfall was due to a 1.8 million of uncollected receivables, which I understand what that means. But the 1.2 million was incomplete property tax audits and other initiatives. What does that mean?
Yeah, so here I'm going to go to Schedule 1. And so what I'm basically saying here is that some things that were in the original budget, so obviously your general funds were down $7 million. And so let's see where in the general fund it was down. And so if we go through the details of the, well, what happened, where did it go? And so if we look at the under property taxes, okay?
Uh-huh.
The last two line items here was out-of-state motor vehicle and motor vehicle taxes. And what they're saying here to me is that one is that they were going to do a search for out-of-state motor vehicle the cars that were in the town of Hamden that were registered out of state. That never occurred. And then number two is well, it says motor vehicle, but it really had to do with the they were initiated a property tax audit, which was not completed during the year. So so if we take the 500 here and the 700, I'm adding that up to say 1.2.
Okay.
Whether the estimates were incorrect or whether the numbers just didn't come in because of COVID or some other timing error issues, we can't really know. But so that's where the 1.2 comes from. And then if I look up here, the first three numbers was the 1.8 basically.
Okay, so
And-
get off the delinquent taxes. Later in the audit findings, you have on the balance sheet $14 million of delinquent taxes.
Mhm.
This 1.8 just sort of added, and now we're at a balance of $14 million. Can you evaluate that for us? Can you tell us what we're doing to collect that and
Yeah.
what we should be doing and if we are doing it and if
Yeah.
compares to
Sure.
other towns?
Yeah, no, that's okay. So I would say that your collection rate is consistent with other towns. And so so there's I don't think there was a problem with that there. Again, we're in a strange year, especially with the executive orders that allowed people to have a lower tax interest rate. So there might have been some timing differences, but in general, you're similar. And so what we're seeing here is a $9 million of taxes uncollected, and associated with that is also interest. So we're allowed to record the receivables of tax interest associated with the delinquent taxes.
I'm losing you. I'm only getting every other word. I don't know. If
Oh, I'm
everyone-
sorry. Okay. So the 14 million includes outstanding taxes as well as interest and liens associated with those taxes. Okay. And so at the state of Connecticut, you charge 1.5% per month or 18% per year on the taxes. And you collect quite a bit of interest. And like I said, too, is that overall, I think you are consistent with other towns. I could also tell you that after 16 years, you're not allowed to collect the taxes. So there is a statute of limitations. So I don't think you ever want to go 16 years with an account not being collected, but it's common for accounts to go 3 to 5 years or even 10 years. As you can see, as you go up, when you go, through these years too, is that it greatly reduces. And I'm familiar, you're also familiar with the suspenses, which is suspenses, they feel they can't collect them. So you're only really writing off $10,000 in this year. So overall, it's not that bad. I did find that there was a collection problems in your police private duty though. And so those are going without being collected. Problem. So that's something that I think needs to be addressed.
Okay, so let's talk about that in a minute. But before we get off this, since these taxes are uncollected, but they're accruing interest, are we receiving the income of the interest? So are we like sort of exacerbating our own problem?
Yeah, so with governmental, you're not allowed to recognize interest or property taxes unless they're collected within 60 days, unless they're available to relinquish current liabilities. So none of the revenues or the interest is recognized.
Okay.
Okay. The only portion of this is recognized is what was collected in July and August.
Okay.
Okay.
And so you brought up the police private duty. I'm going to look at this as like good and bad. So it's bad that we weren't able to collect it. And maybe you can tell us more about that. But in a way, hopefully it's good because hopefully Mr. Jackson is on it now, and that can be sort of found money for our current year operation.
Yeah, I mean, one of the differences, like I said, is that property taxes is a long, has state statutes behind it, allows for a large interest rate. So if you don't collect it in the first year, you're collecting a good interest rate. With private duty, you don't have that same. So you do want to collect that as quick as possible. Otherwise, the general fund is paying for that program.
But I would assume private duty too means that those are mostly corporations and probably sort of larger if they're doing, street work in Hamden. They're probably.
Yeah, there's a. Excuse me?
Can you quantify this number for us? What kind of ballpark are we talking about for the private duty uncollected?
Let's see, I believe you have about 700,000, but we can go to that note.
Wow. All right. Mr. Jackson, did you want to throw your 2 cents in here at all, or you don't have to either? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you had something positive that was happening here, you could share it.
No, but what I would want to say is that determining what our collection processes are and assigning people to actually be captains of different areas is something that we are working on because, $700,000 is real money to me. If I saw it in the street, I would pick it up. And so we should make sure that we are pulling out all the stops, especially since I think you're right, Councilwoman Dolan, that most of these are essentially partner agencies with us. And so, they will write tickets and slips every day. And so at some point we have to call it what it is and have a heart-to-heart talk with them and say, you're in the hole 6 figures, and we got to figure that out before we start to sign off on these slips.
Right. I imagine it's a lot of repeat business, the same guys coming back. So, okay, good. We're all on the same page with that one.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so 528,000 was considered, was not collected within 60 days after year end. That's the number I outlined.
All right. So great. So that's something that is a potential thing that we can collect. Although this happened at the end of June 30th. So perhaps some of these have already been collected now that we're in February. So perhaps you've already collected them and maybe we're making progress already, but at any rate, it'll kind of be like found money for this year. So hopefully this year we'll have a positive in our budget. Actual.
Right. And so one of the things I want to do is go back over the last couple of years and see where it landed. Are these is it a rolling number? Because if it is, then it may not be as much found money. Because if every year at the close of the books, we're $500,000 down, trying to make up, those 14 months in a 12-month cycle may be difficult.
All right. So then The other big number that you talked about, Mr. Capoletti, was the $2.8 million bond premium. So
Mhm.
I really have very limited knowledge of bonds. Can you explain to me, is the bond premium, when you say premium, do you mean that what we bonded for, we ended up earning an extra $2.8 million? So this too is found money, or is this the bond that we sold?
Yeah, so overall, how bonds work is that you have the rating agencies come in and they value it. They put an interest rate towards a bond that they think would sell in the open market. Once it hits the open market, people are either willing to pay more for that bond, for that interest rate, or less. So if they pay less for that bond, it's called a discount. So that means you're paying $98, $99 for $100 of bonds. And then you would show a discount. What's happening to the town of Hamden is every time you go to market prefers the town of Hamden more than the rating agencies. So they're willing to pay more for your interest rate. So 102 for $100 worth of bonds. It's basically a long-term, it's an adjustment to the interest rate, but you're allowed to take that in the general fund as other financial sources ready to be used to liquidate liabilities. Yeah, I mean, the town of Hamden has enjoyed decently large premiums for quite a while.
Okay, well, that's good news. And was this $2.8 million used to close this fiscal year, or is it falling into our current fiscal year?
Yeah, so a premium is recorded when received. So that was received subsequent to the fiscal
Cooper.
year.
Hey, sorry, Cooper. Sorry, my dog eating chocolate cake. Really bad. Okay.
Yeah, so it's only in the report as a subsequent note. So what we do is we want to show that between the year end and we issued our report, that there was more debt brought to the town, and that there was also a related premium with that.
Okay,
So,
so
yeah.
that sounds great. In your note, you also say that because of our low fund balance, making cash management difficult and costly.
Mhm.
It's costly because it hurts our credit rating, and so it costs us more to sell bonds and to get financing. Is that?
There is a relationship between your rating and your fund balance and the availability of cash in your general fund. Yes, but more importantly, and if you sometimes you just go back, it's a big town, a municipality, but if you just go back to your own home, is that are you willing to over borrow money for a project? And then, so anytime you borrow money, it costs money. And so if the project in the end costs 85,000 and you bonded 100,000 for it, well, then it was costly for you on that 15,000. So to over bond a project and then pay the bond back with that original money costs more money for the town. So normally when you have a general fund, you could pre-fund a lot of your projects. And then when the project is complete, you would just bond for the exact amount. So that would be a lot of savings. You wouldn't be paying the interest during the project. And currently you're doing that with bands, but talking to the finance directors over the years, they're worried to start a project and then not have enough money to complete that project. And you're on an annual bond program. So instead of paying for 2 bonds in a year, they always wanted to make sure they had enough money to fulfill their capital projects through the year. So to be conservative, they over bonded.
Okay, so that brings us to the next 2 questions. One is you said in your comments here that it would be very dangerous for us to lose if the ability to issue general obligation bonds were lost.
Mhm.
What are we getting? Are we close to that? Is there Why? would-
That, yeah, I mean, so in the subsequent period, I mean, everything in this audit was disclosed, I feel, and you were able to bond. So no, I don't think it's close to that. But
Okay.
what I'm trying to say, basically what I was saying there is your reliance on bonding. And so what I was worried about that in previous years is that if you didn't bond in any one year, you would fall, the general fund would fall into a deficit. So I was giving you a pre-warning to what happened this year. And then if you weren't able to bond moving forward, which, like I said, the bond market is strong, and I'm probably not the expert on the bond market. You have a financial advisor for that. But I don't, that might be a difficult situation for the town of Hamden. Yeah.
All right. And I know very deep into the audit report, it does talk about the maximum bond that we're allowed to be at. Are we anywhere near our maximum bond levels?
No, but it's not common to be at those levels. So we'll go to the end here. So here is a state mandated schedule of your bonding requirements. And so the bottom line here is the debt limitation. And so according to the state statutes, your total bonds could be 905 million more. And then it breaks down how much in each category.
Oh, great. Okay. So there is plenty of room there too.
There's plenty of room, yeah, as far as
All
that
right.
state statute is concerned.
All right. And then lastly, you talked about the capital funds. And you explained there's 3 ways that we get our money. Once again, is that sort of the good news, bad news? So this year we decided in closing this fiscal year 2020, we decided not to perform any capital sweeps, nor did we reimburse the general fund for the direct costs or the costs. Does that mean that there's sort of a pile of money out there that we can go ahead and do this in fiscal year 2021?
So yeah, right now, so right now I know your direct costs just off the top of my head, because I do review this from time to time. I believe there was 230,000 left in appropriations for direct costs on the road construction. And then there is an IRS limitation of 5% of the total bond to be used for indirect costs. So that's funds that, like I said, did you carry out? So the 5%, might not be I mean, you're limited to 5%. So
That might not be significant.
yeah, it's not, well, it could be, but that's basically what you have available right now, I feel.
Okay. So we just need to go through and look at any projects that we completed in 2020 and, once we hit 2021 and go through and bill our direct costs and our indirect costs and then take that money into income. And then we can also evaluate if we want to do any sweeps at that time, if there is any old projects that were over bonded and they can either be swept or used for future capital improvement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So once funds are, first it should be used for the project that it was designated for. Once the project is complete, you have the ability to put it into a similar project and without bonding. So that would save you money. And then thirdly, if there's no other projects that fit the appropriation, then it can go back into the general fund to pay back the interest and principal of that bond.
Oh, it can. Okay. Okay, good. So that would reduce our indebtedness.
Yeah, it would either be it would be restricted in the general fund for that purpose.
And then you talked a bit about the education grant fund and the fringe benefits. And I really couldn't follow what you were talking about. I wasn't sure if you were saying that this was just a transfer that didn't take place or if we actually have lost revenues here.
Yeah, no, I think it's an area of where your revenues, I think this is an area for you. So, yeah, you don't really have a indirect rate for benefits at the Board of Education. So it's difficult to see the reimbursement. But so the town is unique in that the town pays for all the benefits of the Board of Education through a separate line item. And it doesn't go through the Board of Education budget line. But more specifically is when they're going out for grants, they tend to under budget the fringe benefit line. And the one example I gave was the 4.9 million in the Alliance District. So that's how much they put in their budget for that program for salaries. But I don't think it matches what they paid in the fringe benefit line. They don't have anything in there, I don't think. But you would think that if you wanted an equal allocation for every salary that's planned to be refunded by a grant, they should probably have a benefit indirect rate for those. You understand?
I do. And so I guess our finance team can disseminate this information to our grant writers and to our fellow colleagues at the Board of Ed and try to get our grants to be increased a bit so that we cover all of the expenses instead of just the direct salaries.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it would just be, it's probably a place of revenue.
Thanks
Like I
for
said,
pointing it out.
excuse me?
Thank you for pointing it out and giving us the roadmap to do a little better. And
That's all right. Like I said, at the end of the year, the Board of Ed did give you, I believe, 400,000 for those grants. But like I said, there's no support that I've seen for that. But it's just what they felt was the appropriate number.
okay. All right. And then my last questions, and I'll let someone else jump in here, are the underfunded programs that you're talking about here.
right.
You mentioned the insurance risk, the Ice Rink. Can you sort of walk us through and give us kind of quantify the insurance risk and the Ice Rink?
Yeah. So when we're looking at so when you look, so a lot of times the council talks about the general fund. I think that's where you spend most of your time. But when we're looking to fund the deficit of the general fund, I think you need to look at the whole government as a whole. And some of the areas that did well this year was your pension is being funded, this year appropriately. Your workers' comp has brought itself back pretty well, and your health insurance is doing well. But the two areas that I found that don't have a plan for funding in the future is one was the tornado risk fund. So when the 2018 tornado hit Hamden, you are allowed to, two things you are allowed to get the funding for, you go approved for. One was federal funds from the FEMA program, which you did receive. And then I believe it was 75% of that was supposed to be a local match. Okay. So to cover expenses either that were not going to be funded by FEMA, the state allows you under General Statute Section 7-379 an emergency bonding. Okay. So there's certain restrictions to that emergency bonding that you can go out for bond anticipation notes right away, but those bands have to be bonded within a 2-year period. And so that lapsed August 23rd, 2020. And so what that did was leave a deficit in this account that needs a plan of funding from the general fund, unless they could find another way of funding this. But right now, there is no, that I saw, any plan of funding that deficit in this account. Okay.
And that deficit is,
I believe it was in the area of 800,000.
is that human services? Is that what it's called?
Nope, it's actually, it's called risk management. So it would be, we'll get that for you. It should be on schedule. Here, let me bring it up here. It should be on schedule 3 and 4. Okay, the public emergency account here. There's 2 things in that account. One is your normal risk management, which covers some of your, if you have an insurance claim, you'll put the expenses through there and then get reimbursed by the insurance. And then the remaining deficit here of 861,000 is There's a little bit that's residual in the other account, but in general, it's about 800,000 in the tornado fund that would need to be funded in the future.
Okay. So, okay, so I see that one. Sorry, I was looking on page 79 and 80. Is that the same where it shows? Oh yeah, there you are. So-
What is it?
Human Services, that says it has a deficit of $765,000. What?
Yeah, that's a timing differences in, like I said, is that also if you don't receive the funding within a 60-day period, then we don't recognize the revenues. And you did get some grants specifically of COVID that weren't received, but we'll reimburse the expenses.
Okay, so that one you're sort of saying is going to be okay. We'll be okay there.
Yeah, you have a $719,000 ability. That fund has been set up by the state of Connecticut for your reimbursements with money associated with COVID. And your, I believe your public safety has said that they've spent more than that on those issues.
Okay, so then Public Works, that one has a deficit of $283,000.
Yeah, so here we go. We do list the deficits in the notes. So maybe we could take a look here on the bottom of the page. My pages are hidden, but let's see if I can pick this up. Okay, so on the page, on note 12, it goes through the deficits and how we expect to fund them or not fund them. And so here you see your human resources. And so with your public works, there's outstanding grants. And I believe if I remember correctly, that is your LoCIP grant. So basically LoCIP, you put the money out first and you have to provide the invoices to the state of Connecticut and then reimburse it. And we did notice that those weren't being reimbursed very timely, but it will take sometimes 3 to 4 months to get reimbursement on those.
Okay. And then the Ice Rink, that's got the $790,000 deficit.
Yeah. So the Ice Rink, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. So that's the second one I brought up in the management letter. And so when we tried to take a look at that one, and first thing we did was to review the contract with your Ice Rink management. And we noticed right away that some of the contract terms and conditions just weren't being followed. So specifically, it wasn't, to me, the contract was written as if it was a team effort to operate and manage the ice rink. And so that means that the town and the city would be, this town and the management company would basically be the management company would be a primary of the bank statements and the town would be a secondary. And that would also receive the bank statements directly from the bank and have monthly reports on the performance of the ice rink. So none of that is happening as of right now. And so at this point, management would be difficult to evaluate why the losses are happening, or even to have a month-to-month of analysis. Right away, you could probably say the ice rink didn't have operations for COVID. Because of COVID, things were closed or limited, but we really can't analyze that until we get those monthly statements. And so I have talked to the finance office, and they're working on that. And so I was going to stop by tomorrow to make sure that that's going properly, so that they could look and evaluate that area.
Yeah, so I'll answer very briefly on that. The bank will not allow for a co-signer on this account, so we have to get the statements, and we will be pursuing that diligently as we move forward. There are questions, and they are community questions that we need to talk about regarding the subsidies that we provide for the rink, for the high school, for youth hockey. And so this is where there's some leakage in terms of the total ability of the management team to actually get to zero on the project.
Okay, but that's not a one-year loss.
No,
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 that
it's
is not
we
1 year
spent
loss.
$200,000 for a couple of years. And so we need to fix this 790 and move forward in a contractual place where expenses actually meet revenue. But we're not there now. We provide significant subsidies, and we have to talk about it, you know, in public and say, do we still want to do this?
Quick question, please, if I may. What is the contract term that we're currently working with on the rink management?
What is the contract term? It was actually a long-term contract, but I don't know. You would have to go through the legal logistics through
Oh.
your corporate
A
counsel.
long-term contract.
Yeah, I think it extends from, off the top of my head, I think it goes to, it has the ability to go to 2023. But, you know,
Okay,
there may be, I didn't read it deep enough to see if you can get out of I'm sure there's language in there that your corporate counsel put in.
okay. It might be helpful if we could just take a look at if there's a way to renegotiate that appropriately as needed. Just wanted to know. Thank you.
Mhm.
Right.
Nope.
And I do have the contract on my office desk, which is
Yeah.
3 months here.
Yeah.
But
I understand if that's
it's-
not right at the top of the head.
yeah, it's definitely on the list of things to do.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, let's move on to some other folks' questions. I think I've killed the management letter and been through each line item that you pointed out for us.
Okay.
I can't see from my screen who's next, but I can see that Mick and Burrito both have their hands raised, but I can only see both. So I don't know if somebody can see more than I can see, but.
Bree should go first. She's a member of the committee. I'm a member too, but ex officio. So.
What a gentleman, so chivalrous.
Oh, what a gentleman. Thank you. It was Mick, though. He was the next person up. My question was with, since you talked about the private duty, I think it was to the tune of about $700,000 that was missing or not paid. Are these, my question to Scott, our finance director, that's who I have a question for, is that, do you know who these companies are? You don't have to answer right now. Do you know who they are? Are we still doing business with them? If we are, why are we still doing business with them since they are in arrears to that level? So those are my two questions with the private duty. And, you know, we have to hold the bag on that to pay that if they're not taking care of that. So I'm glad David had brought that to light for us so that we can address that right away, because we are in the hole. And if those are individuals we're still tapping on their shoulder and they're not doing anything, we should not be in contract with any of those individuals still, because they're in arrears for us. That's number one. I'll just do it twofold so someone else can ask, so this doesn't go forever. The other thing was with the ice rink. I am deeply concerned about the management of the ice rink. And there are several reasons why I'm concerned. I'm concerned because it pushed us in a different light as it relates to the Public Works Department. Because of that contract, we have to pay certain different things, I won't say what it is, as it relates to the Public Works. So I want us to look carefully at that contract and maybe look at bringing it back in-house, because it does not benefit us whatsoever. So those are my only concern. I know we provide a lot of stuff for the high school, the youth hockey and skating and all of that, but I don't think it's to that tune where we always have to subsidize that. We're not a town that can afford that at all whatsoever. We brought someone in to manage, and it's been going like this for quite some while, $250,000 here or there. So we need to be much more careful. So that's for you, Scott. Again, you don't really have to answer now. I don't want it to go on too long because I know other members wants to ask question. But for you, David, are there any other concern within this audit other than the ones you've just pointed out that are of great concern for you that we need to look at as a town?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously we can go through the two significant findings that that I put into the single audit report, and then also, what I've put together hopefully is a management letter that gives you a little bit of a roadmap of some of the problems that I think through the audit. And so I hope that those are complete. But if you have questions with anything else, I'd love to. You're welcome to get them to me, and I hopefully could find an answer.
Okay.
But yeah, I think
Certainly. I have some questions, but I'll send them to Kristen, and then she can forward them to you.
That would be great.
That was the instructions, and so we can do that. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Yeah. And I'm happy to give a very brief overview. Police extra duty, you see them on the roads every day in this town, and they're protecting certain types of services in large measure. And so there are partners, there are people we deal with every day. We just have to square it up. And so that's something we're working on out of my office. And Rink Subsidies, we actually have to talk about it because it's written into the contract, and we have to decide whether or not we want to make a change to that and what our capacity is to make such a change, given the contractual parameters that we're in right now, and when can we make the change. But in large measure, I think it's fair to say that the subsidies that we provide for certain users of the rink are material in the deficits in that account. So we just have to talk about it and then decide where we want to land. Public Works does not make money, but we understand their value. Police don't make money, but we understand their value. And so how do we treat this enterprise fund? That's the way I look at it. The rink, and say, okay, so this is what the contract says, but you have to live within the contract, but you also have to pay us our money. And if there's a problem, we have to kind of square it out and talk about it in public.
Madam Chair, may I redirect?
Yes.
So I hear you loud and clear, Mr. Finance Director, and Houston, there is a problem, yeah? Because not only are we paying and we're subsidizing a number of things that they're doing at the rink, but there's also a part of that contract where, as it relates to public works, where we have to pay a 4 hours overtime based on that. So it's not just the $700,000 that we're paying. We have additional money that we're also paying. So this is costing us triple-fold than what it should be costing us. And so those are things that are my concern. And so if we're not making money on this end, and we're not making money from, as it relates to this, we need to do something.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. We also have utility issues. There's a lot, I think, that needs to be worked out. And part of it has to do with COVID. I get it. If you can't bring people in, you can't make money. And so how does the contract address that? I get that, but we gotta talk about it, and we have started those conversations with the operators.
Okay, thank you. Mick, what do you got for us?
Thank you, Councilor Dolan. Mr. Cappelletti, I had one question, which I'm not sure if the scope of which you'd be able to answer. You said earlier that the town was unique in some of its funding of Board of Ed benefits.
Mhm.
I was just wondering if you could if you have an idea of how unique is that? Like, in your experience, are we, the only one who funds everything like that? Or is there a best practice that we could employ when it comes to this? Or, how outside the mainstream is this action? Or is, or do a handful of people do it? Have you
Yeah.
any context that one?
Yeah, I'm not familiar of another municipality that does it this way. I mean, so the finance does separate what is funded by what they're funding on town employees compared to Board of Education employees, and they also separate the retirements of both. So it's not that they don't have the information. It's but this, and I'll point it up here, is that the $40 million outside of the Board of Ed. Includes the Board of Education's medical. So, I think what I'm recommending there is that at least everyone understands, what for every dollar they spend on salaries, how much is the town spending on benefits, and that number should probably be equal, whether it's a general fund expense or whether it's outside the general fund.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
If I can provide some historical perspective on that, Mr. McGarry, I was called into a rare Sunday meeting by then Mayor Henrici, and he said the Board of Ed should educate kids. They shouldn't be a healthcare provider. They shouldn't spend a lot of time on Social Security. So I'm just going to bring it in. And so that's what we did. We figured it out and we brought it in. Is it from an accounting standpoint, is it difficult? It surely is. But that's why we are in this sort of unique position. And there are very few chief elected officials who would make that call to say, yeah, I'm looking at 10% medical inflation year over year. Doesn't matter. I want them to focus in on educating kids, nothing else. So that's how we ended up in this position.
Yeah, and just so, if I could just add to that, I'm sorry. But so the medical insurance fund is normally ran by the city. That's pretty consistent across the board. So I don't think you'll ever find another Board of Education that has a separately stated medical fund. And there might be, I think there's probably state statute reasons for that. Specifically, is the Board of Education can't, or normally cannot have a fund balance. They can't make money. So at the end of the year, except for under very small restricted purposes, all money has to come back to the town. So for the Board of Education to maintain their own medical fund may not be even capable, and it's not done. It's more than so. What you normally see is that the medical expense would be appropriated to the Board of Ed, which then would give it back to the city. So you'll see that quite a bit.
So it's unique, but we're kind of cutting out an extra step in a way. Instead of sending it to them, then sending
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, it could be confusing, but yeah, that's exactly true.
Yeah,
Their appropriation is, excuse me?
Ultimately, we were one of the few communities who was able to reduce their MBR when there was MBR because of the way we set this up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I said too, it's in the end of the day, it's general fund money going to that expense. What budget line it goes through is what it goes through. But I think why we're bringing it up is probably because it's not equally being distributed amongst the special revenue funds. I think it's probably.
Thanks. That was very helpful. That kind of context was really, really helpful to thinking about this. The other question I had, so the ice rink.
Yeah, no, it's all right.
Do we have an idea? So it's costing us money right now under this model, but do we know how much it cost us previous to this model? So is it possible to get a year by year, like if we go,
So,
we take
yeah.
it back, it's going to cost us more, or is it costing us, I'm just curious, what's the total cost and what's the best solution, so.
Yeah, so the acting, when I looked through history, it was your acting finance director, Mr. Hull, who presented it to council to have this separately stated. And I don't know the reasons why, but I know it's in your meetings that he did that. And that you could ask him, but I think that's probably one of the reasons he did that, is to see. So everything before that, everything was ran through the general fund and you couldn't really see if it was a loss or not. And so I think we do, it was separate now for 2 years and there is a noticeable loss. That's what brought you to today, is probably some of the actions of your acting finance director 3 back.
Well, I think that's good that we can have 3 back. So we can see, now we see it. It's very clear. I'm just, how much was our cost, when we had it in-house? So I guess, is that something we have to look at in-house that's outside of your purview?
I think, if I remember correctly, is that, and we're going way back, and maybe Mr. Jackson could feed on this, but I think there was problems with the in-house, if I remember correctly.
There were operational issues that we tried to address by getting out of the business of running an ice rink. So it's not apples to apples. I mean, I think we can provide, obviously, this was not the easiest trick in the book, and we had to provide legal documents. I'm sure we can dig back through and find them, but it's not going to be apples to apples.
Thank you. That's all I had. Ms. Dolan covered a lot of territory. So those are my questions. Thank you very much.
All right. Councilman Alston, did you have some questions? Did I say it this time?
Yeah, it's Alston. I do.
Alston. I'm gonna write it. I got the Geron, but now I need the Alston. Okay.
No problem. We have time. Mr. Capoletti, good evening. I'm a new councilman, so I know we have not met. Thank you for the presentation tonight, and I'm glad to have you. I just heard a couple things as I went along the list. You supplied us with a management letter. Kristen, you have that? Councilman Dolan, you have that?
Yes, my apologies. We just got it today, and so I forwarded it to you, but at 6:55. I wasn't exactly sure what proper procedure was. In the past, we had gone into executive session and, we were face to face. And so Mr. Capoletti handed it to us. So I wasn't sure at what point I was supposed to share it. So you have it now in your email, but just now.
Okay, thank you. So some of the comments that you said tonight, I haven't, I'm not fully read in on yet, but just stepping back, when we talked about the delinquent receivables, there were several types of delinquent receivables based off of different regulation. And Mr. Jackson, are you aware of the number of pools that we have of these? Or Mr. Capoletti, are you aware of that?
The number of, go ahead.
Yeah, I am not aware of the full scope, Councilman, but I'm trying to get my arms around it because, hey, anything over 6 figures, we have to prioritize and get a move on.
Yeah. And I would say that, just understanding that there's different buckets and there's different regulation that are driving these. I heard you say that there's a 60-day pool And then there's an extended pool after that, where we can't draw the funds into the current year. Could you step back? Do you have any idea, just a roundabout of what you saw this year, how many different ones there are?
Yeah, okay. So with the state statutes are pretty well written on property taxes,
Mhm.
and less so on receivables under private duty. And I think you did bring up a good point, is that when you're talking about private duty, police private duty, there's three distinct parties involved that you have to consider. One is part of your union contract with the police that they provide, they get paid for, and that the town provides private duty. You also have, I believe, an ordinance on that. And then, of course, you also have the private person who needs the safety. So I think some of those might be a little bit more difficult, because when they came to me and said, well, we're just going to stop that program, I'm saying you may not be able to, because you're going to have a union problem, and you may have an ordinance problem, a safety problem. So those are some things, is that, Mr. Jackson has a little bit harder first to pairs of providing services, not getting paid, and then saying, well, we're not going to do it again. It's going to need a little bit of, your corporate counsel should be involved with this because of the three parties. So that's, as far as the private duty, that's I think that would answer your question. And then on the property taxes, that you're only allowed to collect it for 16 years. So the 17th year, you have to write it off, and you cannot go after it. And so, before then, you probably have, let's take a look here. But you could see that the numbers dropped significantly when you go back to 2004, 2003. And so the write-offs in basically what we're looking at here is that lawful correction, that 37,932 was your write-offs last year. So you probably bill in 2003. Well, your taxes weren't that high, but think of and maybe Mr. Jackson could help me, but maybe think of $150 million. Of $150 million that was billed out, 37,000 wasn't paid. So that's a very small percentage.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's just it's a timeliness issue, where we're looking at we're collecting it, but we're collecting it over.
Yeah, the rest is a timing issue. Yeah, I mean, you're in the 98% collection rate, I feel, and which is normal in the state of Connecticut from town to town.
That's good to know. If we can say that we're not far out of line, but if we did a better job, we'd help ourselves out.
Yeah, right. I don't even think we're out of line. I think we're sort of tipping toward the top of the scale.
Yeah.
But the other side of it is, what do you do with it? Do you do a tax foreclosure and own property? Do you kick somebody out?
We don't want to be in the business too much, right?
Yeah. So I mean, but those are the alternatives, and I think it's fair to talk about them, fairly and openly, and come to a sort of a community decision on what we're going to do.
Yeah, and just to add to that too, so you have people who you have residents who just don't have the ability to pay. You have a portion of people who are in a condition such as in an estate or something like that, where it's just being pushed back. So there's always a percentage of taxes that just cannot be paid in that 1 year. And so to get 100% collection would be impossible. It's probably worth looking at least to have, to know that there's some procedure in place. Tax liens tend to help collections, and you'll be surprised that they usually don't end. Usually people find the money, but like I said, it's you're in the area of a municipal your size, so I don't see it as a problem. And you're collecting most of it, and you're collecting it at an 18%, which, you know, is probably a very good investment.
Okay. This was brought up as well, the two ICs that you already talked about. Did we cover anything that was in those ICs already?
I'm sorry, ICs?
The internal controls that you talked about. You had two.
Oh, okay, great, yeah. So one, we talk about, I mean, that's good. Thank you for bringing this to that. So one issue is dealing with the general fund deficit, and you know, which will need a corrective action plan to be sent to the Connecticut. Obviously, a negative fund balance is against state statutes, and so was it, you know, we find it to be an internal control problem, and we went through some of those areas, I think, pretty well on why it is, and that's just repeated in the finding. One of the things in the finding is, if you didn't get it already, is that the changeover in the finance officer has not been helpful to the town. And you know, the tornado, not bonding the tornado fund, you know, probably was associated with that, the turnover, and then also the reduction of finance personnel. And a great example of what happens is that you had a part-time risk manager for about 2 years, I believe. And this year you brought in one full-time. And with the full-time risk manager in place, he was able to save you a tremendous amount of money, and to, especially in the heart and hypertension area. And I think what we're seeing too at the Ice Rink is, why wasn't that being reported? And, you know, I think probably the person who was supposed to do that is a vacant position. So, you know, I think it's another thing that Mr. Jackson might have to consider, is a reorganization of the finance office, and either maintain the appropriate personnel, or to see, you know, how all these things are going to get done. But I think two issues that we talked about in length today, which would be the Ice Rink, and the reporting not occurring, and then secondly, the private duty delinquencies, which had to be told by the auditor and not anyone in the finance office. And I think those positions, like I said, were, as the reduction of personnel, no one was replaced to put into those, to oversee those areas. And so that's part of that first finding, is to say, you know, the finance office should probably be taken a look at to reorganize. And then the second one has to do with your pension audit. And so I think you guys probably talked a little bit about that through your meetings, but you know, you're aware that the COLA calculation was not calculated properly for a number of years, and it has a history of that. And then also when through the pension, there was other issues where you would have a deceased pensioner, and the payments were still being made to the spouse, which happens. But when I asked what procedures you have in place to oversee the payments of pensioners and to make sure everything goes well after the individual retires, there was limited procedures done in that situation. And so we're just recommending that that some procedures are added in the pension, the payments of pensions, to make sure that the person is in one alive and still is active member. And then number two, to oversee the COLA. I haven't seen anyone approve the COLA. Basically, it went out to a third party who would calculate it. Obviously, there was a lack of communication, which caused the town millions of dollars. And so we're just asking that you know, the procedures be changed so that those things at least could be reasonably checked at a reasonable time. Does that make sense, Mr. Olson?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
I only had another one point. When we looked at the individual fund deficits, not having seen the report, is there anything more descriptive about the resolutions that you have in, or about the issues themselves, except for that note?
Like I said, in two areas, when we see deficits, we try to see, we look to see if there's an ability to fund that deficit.
Mhm.
And obviously the general fund is to increase taxes. Each of them have some way to fund that. The two areas I couldn't find a way there was a plan to funding was the ones that I mentioned, which was the tornado risk fund and also the ice rink. And then to go through some of them, I mean, like I said, is if you're in the council's been putting into an oversight area to correct the deficit of the town. I mean, we need to probably consider the whole municipality. And we went through most of these here. The winter green magnet school I do mention in my management letter, and that's waiting for an audit to be completed by the state, but that's an extremely old program. I would say almost upwards of 20 years. But I believe the state is aware of it and is actively at least inquiring about it. But it just until that audit is complete, it's not going to be funded. And so, like I said, that's something that either Mr. Jackson would know about or will know about. The public emergency account, that's the tornado that we spoke about. And then the other ones here are the internal controls. The internal service funds. And so, and a lot of these are, there's a small portion that is current, but in general, those are long-term in nature. So they would be paid by future service charges to the general fund mostly. And so up above here, it does show you what the long-term portion of that is. Just so you realize how an insurance fund works is that the liability, we record the liability in the insurance fund when an injury occurs.
Yeah.
And not when it's reported. So it comes out with this calculation that's done by the actuaries, which is a long-term liability, which incurs some of that. And then other of those are, and in the insurance is you pay out, you may pay off for a large case and then refund it over a number of years, amortize it over a number of years. So you have that going as well. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's some commentary at least about the Wintergreen Magnet School in the management letter, not necessarily each one of these.
No, just the ones that, yeah, a lot of these things are just timing differences. So I didn't really go through those as much.
Okay.
In audits past, I have commented on the workers' compensation, medical, and the post-employment. But normally, like I said, is when we see those going in the correct direction, then we don't comment it. When we see it increasing in the wrong, building a deficit over a number of years, then we would report on it. That the idea behind every fund outside of the general fund is that it always approaches zero. Not in the current year, but at least in a number of years. And so we see that it's growing in the wrong direction, we will comment on it.
Okay.
Okay.
Just for reference, I can tell by the conversation you've been an auditor for a while. How long?
No, there's I believe I'm in so we usually go, there's this ordinance that restricts the length of an audit. So I'm trying to think, this is this is the third or fourth year. And I think your ordinance restricts me to 6 years. And then years past, I was the auditor probably 15 years ago or so.
Showing your age.
Excuse me?
Showing your age.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the background. And
No, that's okay.
Conversation.
All righty. Councilwoman Shoemaker, I think you have some.
Yes, thank you. This is just a quick note to my council colleagues. The ice rink, we also know is one of our highly inefficient buildings in terms of electricity use. So I'm not sure if their electricity account is part of the tracking of total expenses, but we do know from our EPA audit of our buildings that that is one of our top inefficient buildings. And it's very costly when it's inefficient, because remember, we're keeping ice frozen all year long, including during heat waves in the summer. And there are good standards for that, and we need to review those from a building perspective and think about if there are, if we're going to keep operating an ice rink, we have to think about making that much more efficient. So I just wanted to add that note to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Shoemaker. We understand that we have certain contractual obligations as it pertains to utilities. So we're wrapping that into sort of a total cost of operations review of the facility.
Great, thanks.
Right. Councilwoman Rowe Lewis, do you have another question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Cappelletti, just one more question for you. The golf course. Not sure if that came up or not. I didn't get a chance to double back on your audit, but that's one of our contracts that are out there that for need us to tap into as well. Since we're always losing money on the golf course, on the ice rink, and those are two properties that we need to pay closer attention to. Mr. Jackson, former Mayor Jackson. Yes, sir.
Yeah, the golf course has entwined us for a generation now. So it's I actually have a meeting on it tomorrow. I'm sorry, Councilwoman, I don't have good answers for you on the golf course tonight. But yeah, we gotta figure it out. I know that. So I spent the last year in New Haven, and the golf course was doing bang up business because people used it as a socially distant way to get exercise. So maybe it's in better shape than it was a year ago. But I don't know. I don't know yet. But hopefully I'll know better in about 24 hours.
Yeah, and just so you know, so the difference between the two, though, is that the golf course is, I believe, recorded in the general fund, and the ice rink was now recorded outside the general fund, and so we're reporting on it or talking about it tonight because it is a deficit outside the general fund. So that's the difference between, as far as the audit is concerned.
Appreciate that, Mr. Cappelletti. But Mr. Jackson, you know what you have to take care of. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilwoman.
Okay, and if I could just add, Mr. Jackson, I don't recall seeing any or revenues associated with the golf course in the operating budgets. If and when you get a chance to review the budget book, can you let us know where those expenses and incomes are flowing through? I don't recall seeing them anywhere.
Absolutely. I do have to take a look at it, but I will get that to you, Councilwoman.
Great. Does anyone else have any questions? Mr. Cappelletti, can I bother you for one more? It has to do with debt. On page 33, it shows that the debt is $21 million, but on page 31, it's 15 million. Can you sort of help me reconcile those two numbers so I understand what the current year debt service payments are?
Sure. the debt service payments.
Yeah,
On page,
I think that I picked up on page 33 versus page 31. And I think I know what the difference is, but I'm just confused by the accounting for it and how it will affect this year's deficit. If we don't, if those savings based on our bond restructuring that we completed in the spring of 2021 will affect our current year shortfalls.
So you're on 30, so on page 31,
On page 31, it said that our due in 1 year, our debt
Okay.
service payment is 15,040,040.
mhm,
But then on page 33, our current year debt service payment of 2021.
oh, you know why, is you're restructuring.
Right. So can you just sort
Yeah.
of walk me through what, I imagine that the true debt service that we owe is 15 million. However, our plan was to pay the 21 million. That's why we did the restructure.
Yeah,
I'm still confused with the accounting, how it's going to work.
yeah, I'll have to get back to you on the, it's probably in the,
Oh, good. I was hoping I could get you on at least one question. Now
I
I can go to bed.
have to, I have to look at the restructuring of the August bonding. But
Thanks. Yeah, that's exactly what the
That's what be
difference
the
is.
difference.
I'm
But I
just,
believe we got, yeah,
yeah, okay, great. If you could sort of help us, by March 29th, understand what we're going to do and how that's going to be accounted for, and if
yeah.
in fact there will be some savings. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? So I can't see everybody because Mr. Capoletti is sharing the screen and I'm not the host. So Mick, if I
could-
bother you to see if anyone else.
There are no hands up at this time, Councilwoman Dolan.
Great. So let's make a motion, please, to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Can we have a second?
Yes, second.
Okay. Good night, everybody, and thank you so much.
Good night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Capoletti. Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Jackson.
Thank you.
Coletta for coming on. Thank you very much. I appreciate you.
Yeah, excellent
Thanks, Madam Chair.
for all your hard work.
Thanks, everyone. Yep.
Yeah,
Appreciate
and thanks,
that.
Kath, for coming on. Well,
Everybody stay well.
Yeah, I'm sorry you don't feel well. I hope that
Yeah.
you feel better soon.
Yeah, feel better, Kat.
Will
Yeah.
do. Thank you. Thank
Bye.
you.
good night, everybody.